9 sailors set out in 1968 to become the first person to sail solo around the world without stopping. Only one made it back. One never came home at all. 4 more turned back before they'd even cleared the Atlantic. A 5th turned back just after entering the Southern Ocean, and of the 2 who made it furthest, one lost his boat entirely, and the other simply gave up on finishing, choosing to keep sailing rather than come home a winner. Every one of them had to cross the same stretch of water to even have a chance at the record, and more than 50 years and dozens of attempts later, in boats built from wood, fiberglass, and now carbon fiber, that same stretch of water is still doing exactly what it did to them. That's the Southern Ocean, and here's exactly why no amount of modern engineering has ever managed to tame it. Start with the geography, because this is the one ocean on Earth with nothing standing in its way. At the latitudes between roughly 40 and 60 degrees south, wind circles the entire globe without ever hitting a continent, since Antarctica sits too far south, and South America, Africa, and Australia all taper off before reaching those latitudes. Sailors gave those wind belts their own names generations ago: the Roaring Forties, the Furious Fifties, and past 60 degrees, the Screaming Sixties. In the Northern Hemisphere, the equivalent latitudes run straight into North America, Europe, and Asia, which break up the wind before it can build real momentum. Down south, there's nothing to break it, so the same westerly gale can blow for thousands of miles without ever losing energy, and the ocean surface it's dragging across has thousands of miles to build waves in response. Sailors have a saying about it that predates modern forecasting entirely. Below 40 degrees south, there is no law. Below 50 degrees south, there is no God. That unbroken wind also drives the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on the planet, moving more water than any other current on Earth entirely around Antarctica in the same direction as the wind above it, reinforcing the exact same building process. The water itself sits only a few degrees above freezing even in summer, which means a sailor who ends up in it isn't just uncomfortable, they're on a countdown before hypothermia sets in, a completely different risk profile than falling overboard anywhere in the tropics. And underneath all of it is the remoteness. The most isolated point on the entire planet, a spot in the South Pacific called Point Nemo, sits inside the Southern Ocean, roughly 2,700 kilometers from the nearest land in any direction. It's so remote that when the International Space Station passes overhead at around 400 kilometers up, the astronauts on board are closer to that spot than any human standing on solid ground. Race organizers have said a rescue vessel diverted to that area could take more than 2 weeks just to arrive. None of that would matter for solo sailing records if there were a way around it, but there isn't. Every serious circumnavigation record, from the original 1968 Golden Globe race to today's Vendee Globe, is defined by passing south of the 3 Great Capes, the Cape of Good Hope, Cape Leeuwin, and Cape Horn, which by definition forces every competitor directly through the worst of these latitudes. It's also the fastest way around the world, since those same brutal westerlies push a boat downwind at speeds nothing else on Earth can match, which is exactly why record-chasing sailors keep sailing straight into it instead of routing around. Modern race organizers have tried to soften the danger by drawing what's called an ice exclusion zone, a line sailors aren't allowed to cross that keeps boats north of the worst iceberg fields drifting up from Antarctica. It helps with one specific hazard, but it can't move the wind, the current, or the cold water any farther north, and staying north of it to dodge ice often means sailing straight into the most compressed, most violent part of the wind belt instead. The first Golden Globe race in 1968 showed exactly what that trade-off costs. Of the 9 men who started, 4 retired before even leaving the Atlantic, and a 5th turned back not long after entering the Southern Ocean itself, done in by inexperience, storm damage, or a boat that simply wasn't ready for what came next. Donald Crowhurst never actually entered the Southern Ocean at all, secretly sailing in circles in the Atlantic instead and faking his position reports because he knew, deep down, that his boat and his own experience weren't enough to survive it. A deception that unraveled into a mental breakdown so complete he vanished from his own boat, found 10 days after his last radio call with nobody aboard and a logbook full of rambling, delusional mathematics. Bernard Moitessier, deep into a commanding lead after rounding Cape Horn and with the record all but guaranteed, decided the prize wasn't worth returning to civilization for and kept sailing straight past the finish line, choosing a second lap of the same ocean over becoming famous. Only Robin Knox Johnston finished, arriving home after 312 days at sea, the sole survivor of a race the Southern Ocean had already decided the outcome of before it even reached the Pacific. If you are finding this interesting, be sure to subscribe. Nearly 30 years later, in the 1996-97 Vendee Globe, modern fiberglass racing yachts with satellite communication and professional shore teams ran straight into the same wall. On January 5, 1997, French competitor Thierry Dubois capsized and dismasted in the Indian Ocean sector of the Southern Ocean. The very next day, British sailor Tony Bullamore's boat lost its keel and flipped upside down roughly 2,500 kilometers off the Australian coast in winds topping 90 knots. Bullamore survived 4 days, trapped in an air pocket inside his own capsized hull, rationing a single bar of chocolate in total darkness before the Royal Australian Navy found him alive. Canadian sailor Jerry Roofs, running second in the race at the time, went silent the same week and was never found alive, his empty boat washing up on the coast of Chile 5 months later. A fourth sailor, Frenchman Raphael Dinelli, capsized in the same storm and was pulled from a life raft by fellow competitor Pete Goss, who diverted his own race to reach him. One storm in one stretch of ocean took out 4 boats in the space of 2 days. Modern technology didn't fix it either. In the 2018 revival of the Golden Globe race, sailed deliberately on 1960s style boats without modern electronics to recreate the original challenge, 5 of the 18 starters were dismasted in Southern Ocean storms within a single season. Indian Navy Commander Abhilash Tomi was rolled a full 360 degrees, roughly 3,000 kilometers southwest of Perth, suffering a severe back injury that left him unable to move, requiring a multinational rescue involving French, Australian, and Indian forces that took days to reach him. Weeks later, British sailor Susie Goodall was pitch-poled and dismasted 2,000 miles west of Cape Horn in 60-knot winds, her cabin gutted and her rig destroyed, eventually plucked off her wrecked boat by the crew of a passing cargo ship. And in the 2020 to 2021 Vendee Globe, sailing one of the most advanced racing yachts ever built, French skipper Kevin Escoffier watched his carbon fiber hull literally break in half at 27 knots, roughly 1,500 kilometers southwest of Cape Town, the bow snapping upward to a 90-degree angle as the stern flooded beneath him. He had only seconds to send a distress message before abandoning ship into his life raft. He was rescued 11 hours later by fellow competitor Jean Lacombe, the same sailor who had himself been pulled from an upturned hull near Cape Horn 12 years earlier, a full circle of the same ocean claiming a different boat every time. Here's what actually explains why the Southern Ocean still ends these records, in 5 points. First, there's no landmass anywhere on the planet at these latitudes to break the wind, so storms build with a fetch no other ocean on Earth can match, and the record course requires sailing directly through the worst of it. Second, the same unbroken westerlies drive the largest current on Earth in the same direction, compounding the wave building instead of counteracting it, stacking energy into the sea state on top of what the wind alone would produce. Third, the water temperature sits only a few degrees above freezing even in the height of summer, turning any time spent in the water into a race against hypothermia rather than a simple rescue. Fourth, the remoteness around places like Point Nemo means help, if it's coming at all, is measured in days, not hours, and a sailor in real trouble has to survive on their own long enough for it to arrive. And fifth, every official circumnavigation record requires passing south of the Great Capes by definition, so there's no faster or safer route that avoids the Southern Ocean entirely, and no amount of boat technology changes that basic geography. The Southern Ocean isn't dangerous because sailors keep making the same mistake generation after generation. It's dangerous because it's the only place on the planet where wind, current, cold, and distance from help all stack in the same direction at once, and every official record attempt has to sail directly through the middle of it to count. Wooden boats broke there in 1968. Fiberglass boats broke there in 1997. Carbon fiber foiling boats broke there in 2020. The hulls keep changing, the navigation keeps improving, the rescue coordination keeps getting faster, and the ocean still doesn't care. If you want to see what happens when boat builders actually try to engineer a hull tough enough to survive conditions like this on purpose, click that video on screen right now because a few of them came remarkably close.